Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. This is going to be an amazing episode. If you're a business owner and you're not worrying about your business reputation, you need to start learning about that. And that's what we're going to be talking about. My friend Dave, he's actually a Navy veteran. He's actually an author, teacher, trainer. He's a Swiss Army knife. He does it all. Dave, thank you so much for hopping on today.
I don't know which Dave you're talking to, but I'm glad to represent him anyway. Good to see you, Richard.
How are you doing today?
Man, I'm living the dream. I really am. I'm so fortunate to be in the place that I'm at and to do the things I get to do and get to talk to pretty cool people like yourselves. I can't imagine what life would be like if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now.
And I love everything you're doing, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. But a lot of people don't realize how important your business reputation is until it goes in the shitter for doing something stupid. Kind of like when Lance Armstrong had the world and then find out that he was doping it, and then from then on his reputation was in the shitter. So We're going to be talking about that in a minute. But talk to us a little bit about where you come from, where you grew up, and how you became the man that you are today.
So I appreciate that. I'll try to make it as quick as possible. I'm from the East Coast originally, preteen years, about an hour outside of New York City in Connecticut, and then my teenage years in the DC area, particularly Maryland, where I just spent 10 days back there visiting family and friends. I got out to San Diego because luck of the draw, I was in a Navy junior ROTC unit at my public high school in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and a retired naval officer, Lieutenant Commander John Wesley Gaynor III, sat all of the seniors down and had us write out our ROTC scholarship. And by pure happenstance, thanks to the Reagan administration, I got a scholarship and was able to go in ROTC, get my commission, come out to San Diego. And that's where I grew up. And it was actually when I showed up on my first ship, 22 years old, staring at 12 other guys as the anti-submarine warfare officer. They all had more experience, were smarter than I was, and they wet nursed me to being the leader that I was. That was my first foray, 2 of the 3 years I was on that ship before I went down to engineering. And what I learned at that point has really served me well, because the first 6 months for me were brutal. I was expecting to fail, and in many respects during that first 6 months I was, until I had that epiphany where I woke up and said, you know what? If I'm going to fail, how about I go down swinging? How about I give it a shot? How about I not psych myself out? How about I actually work for the people that I'm privileged to serve and try my damnedest? And you know what was happening? Once I started not caring so much about the outcome as much as my effort, stuff started to happen. Things started to succeed. Exercises started to actually bear fruit. And we became a real functioning division, because I stopped caring about whether or not I was going to succeed and started caring about, am I going to step up to the plate? Am I going to be accounted for? Am I going to show up? Am I going to be present? And if you do all those things, right, not every time, maybe not a majority of the time, but the times that matter, you're going to succeed. You're going to get your hits. I use the baseball analogy, right? Best hitter in baseball fails 2 out of 3 times they step up to the plate, right? They batting averages around 330 or so, 350. That means 2 out of 3 times they step up to the plate to do their primary job, they fail. And once I took that analogy in the Navy, things started happening. That got me the courage to apply for the public affairs officer role, which had me deployed more in my latter half of my 9-year career. And again, those opportunities that I had, some of them didn't look like much beforehand, but I started to step up and I started to be accountable, and stuff started to succeed. And I've carried that through in the 30 years I've been gainfully employed by something, and the 20 years in civilian world, and the 16 years being my own coach and consultant. And it was that time period. So that's my quick down and dirty story.
All right, guys, we got to go. It's been great. No, but let's talk about, let's pop back, because I love people's stories. And for me, I had problems going through boot camp because I joined the military. I had hair down on my ass, blonde hair, earrings, everything. And so I had a lot of problems being a street kid from Jersey, trying to fit into the military. So did you immediately take to the Navy?
No. I got lucky. I literally go back to high school, right? That junior ROTC unit, which was a class, right? There's classes you could sign up for. And it was my sophomore year, or finishing up my ninth grade, getting ready to go sophomore year. And I had this class slot to fill. And the guidance counselor was like, well, here are your options. You've got all the basic courses. You can do some electives. And there was junior ROTC unit. I said, oh, that sounds like fun. And it happened to be Navy junior ROTC. And so I signed up for it, thinking I'd do it for a semester and then move on there. And then I walk in, and this retired naval lieutenant commander that I told you about, Lieutenant Commander Gaynor, turned to us and said, well, this is a 3-year program. I'm like, the hell is he talking about? I'm just here for a semester. And then before you knew it, I was taking more classes, and I was building up, in the senior leadership ranks to a certain level, still not really thinking that the Navy was going to be a career until he sat all of his seniors down and wrote the scholarship. And then it was probably still after my second year as a midshipman in an ROTC unit in the DC area before I started to actually believe that I could be a Navy officer. And then when I got commissioned, I was excited about it. And then again, on my first ship, still not really confident in my own abilities until, again, I stopped worrying about that outcome. I know I keep going back to that, but I think it's a misnomer that, you see some people who are really successful and like, man, it just seems to all work out for them. It's total bullshit. Nothing works out for everybody at first blush. And if it does, that means there's a failure coming later on, because that's where everybody learns. And for me, once I figured that out, and you stop worrying about the box score, that whole Talladega Nights movie, if you're not first, you're last. What a bunch of crap. It's all about showing up, being accountable, taking your swings, and ultimately you'll get your hits and you'll find success. And you'll realize that the failures on those points in between aren't failures. They're moments to learn something new. Every failure comes with a lesson learned to make you better. And that's why we have them.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I was always privileged to be on either the XO or the CO. I was always on their tank. So I got to learn a lot from their perspective, because they privy me to going to a lot of meetings, going to a lot of briefings. But I found the officers that were the most successful were the ones that listened to the enlisted, because even though you're whatever, if you're a first lieutenant, second lieutenant, you outrank somebody that's been in the military 25 years, but they have that 25 years of experience that you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you just listen to the people that have been there, done that. So what was that like going, being a young man, being an officer, but also having somebody's crusty old guys that you can lean on and learn from instead of having to reinvent the wheel?
I talked about that first division that I had when I was anti-submarine warfare officer on a guided missile frigate. And those 12 guys, by and large, right, wet nursed me through my first year until I actually could learn to be an officer. And I mean a real officer, somebody who was capable of leading. And when I started to have the confidence about 2 or 3 months in that I wasn't so worried about my outcome, when you develop that confidence, you recognize that I don't know everything I'm supposed to know. And by the way, I'm not supposed to. And so that's when you rely on the people who've been in the trenches for as long, or in this case, been on the deck plates and knew this. And they're like, sir, here's the reason why this works better than that. And when I started really listening to them, I was listening beforehand, but I mean, really listening and digesting what they had to say, you realize that's where the nuggets really were. And I think for most of us, we learn that the hard way. We learn that because we feel like we need to know all the answers. And I see that with business leaders that get into crises. I see that with senior managers. I see that with owners. I see that with high profile individuals. Everybody puts them on a pedestal that, oh, they're the all knowing, all successful. And they feel like they've got to measure up to that. And the reality is that the best leaders, and you and I both know this, right? The most confident leaders are the ones who rely on others for input and are able to then make decisions based on what they believe is right, based on the data that they're getting in an objective manner, and execute for that, and are less worried about the outcomes than the effort.
And one thing I have, my friend, his name is John McCaskill, retired Navy SEAL commander. He wrote the book called Embrace the Suck.
Yeah.
And I asked,
yeah.
I said, how did you make it in its over a 20-year career? He said, I cared about my guys. And a lot of people don't realize that to be a successful leader, whether it's in the military or to be an entrepreneur, is you have to care. And when people know that you care, they will run through walls for you. So talk about how you became a leader of men.
When I realized that to be successful, I needed to have their back. Now, that doesn't mean that you lower the standard, right? Or don't hold people accountable for that. But it was one of the things that I said early on. I said, look, you give me 110%, and we're continually learning division. In other words, we learn from our mistakes. I'll give you 110% back. I'll give you more back than you give me. But that's the contract that we will have. And if you do that for me, I will do that for you. And I go back to that first year where they were training me. I had seen fellow division officers who didn't take that edict, right? Who didn't have the confidence, so they felt like they had to be all knowing. And the guys and gals on that ship would just let them fail, would just let them falter. And there were more times than I can count where my team grabbed me from the depths of some stupid stunt I was about ready to pull and go, whoa, 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 sir, back here, here's where you're walking into, because I was just blind to it, right? I just didn't have the experience. And that was another moment for me. But it was hard lessons learned. I mean, I had moments where I was called into the commanding officer's stateroom, being chewed out on the carpet, thinking my career was over before that lesson was infused. And people, and you look back on that, not to get into some sea stories, but there were times where people were like, "Wow, that really wasn't your fault." Like those instances that you were sort of called out on didn't really occur because of something you did. I said no, but my mentality was I expected to fail. My mentality was that I was expecting that I was not going to succeed. And when you put that mindset in there of not being confident and worrying about the outcome, what you do by default is you expect to fail. And then that's exactly what happens. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when I figured that out and stopped worrying about that, and you sort of dive into, or in the case that we talked about, the embrace the suck, there's a reason why we should embrace the suck, right? We are so pain averse as a society, but sometimes when we lean into it, the lessons we're supposed to learn oftentimes come through uncomfortable situations, personally and professionally. And if you lean into those, the beautiful thing about it, the lessons that you learn, you will never have to go through that pain again. You may recognize it, right? There may be other flavors that come of it, but you won't be debilitated by it. And I've learned that in both my professional life as a Navy officer and now a PR practitioner in crisis PR. And I'm learning that in my personal life several iterations over. Embrace the suck is a mantra that I think more people need to subscribe to.
One thing I love is, we're big, both baseball guys. I love sports. But I also know that whether it's in the civilian life, military, if a leader screws up and says, "I'm sorry," people will forgive you if you mess up and say, "Listen, I screwed up." And a lot of times I messed up and I would apologize. I would bring my squad in and say, "Listen, guys, I screwed the pooch on this one. I'm sorry." And they're more to come to you and say, "Listen, Sarge, I made a mistake." Since, I know that you have no problem admitting when you're wrong. The people below you won't have a problem admitting when they're wrong if they know that you're actually vulnerable and honest.
Like I do crisis PR now, right? And I started that. I said, halfway through my Navy career, I became a Navy public affairs officer. Crisis was just part of the deal. And I got plenty of sea stories on criminal, civil mishaps, operational accidents to count on that. And then in the civilian world, I've done similar matters. You name the crisis, I've probably seen a flavor of it. I don't care what the crisis, I don't care what the organization's involved, I don't care where it is. The two cardinal rules is showcasing empathy and action. And oftentimes it's saying, "I'm sorry." And it doesn't mean you have to admit culpability for something that you're being accused of, but I'm sorry that this situation is now occurring and I'm going to take action in order to help fix it. And I'm going to bring in others to do that. People don't understand how powerful that is sometimes. And again, it goes back to the confidence in being able to be a little bit open and honest with a public. And even in this day of social media where everybody's shouting at each other, you say that, at least half the response you're going to get is people like, "You know what? We want to give you that second chance. You've just been forthright. We understand you've heard us. You've responded to us. You're going to take action and we'll meet you halfway." And those that stick with you are probably going to be more loyal in the long term because you've shown that empathy in action. It's the same thing you learn in military leadership, and people need to learn in business leadership. Empathy in action will carry you far if it's done with great authenticity and it's done with great follow-up.
Okay, now talking about baseball, I'm a big Yankee guy. I've been a Yankee guy since.
Sorry. Oh, I thought we were having such a good time.
But
I grew up a Met fan.
My wife's a Met fan, so we kind of
Okay.
our house is divided. But when I was, when I'm growing up in the '90s,
Yeah.
the big four was A-Rod, Derek Jeter,
Yeah.
Andy
Oh, yeah.
Pettitte, and now Derek Jeter is known as the captain because he
Right.
worried about whose name was on the front of the jersey, not the back. But also, when Andy Pettitte and A-Rod both got busted for PED use, Andy said, "Guys, I screwed up. I'm sorry." And they forgave him, and that was it. And unfortunately, because A-Rod said, "Not me, wasn't me, I didn't do it," he's still paying for it 20, 25 years later.
Sure.
So I think a lot of it is because Andy just said, "Listen, guys, I screwed up. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." And it kind of went away. So is that what you're kind of talking about? Where if you deny something and deny it and deny it, and then it comes out, people are going to hate you just because you lied to them again.
100%, right? It's the inauthenticity. Look, everybody has faults. Everybody has missteps. And it's hard, again, without that internal confidence that we develop, to admit to that. But doing so is so important when it is yours to own, because people will give you a second chance. It's rarely ever, short of some egregious criminal behavior or things like that, where people serve jail time, but things of that nature, the people that wind up getting hurt for longer term are the ones who become argumentative, who are vehemently denying it, who are trying to cover up. And it's not the infraction that gets the public against you permanently. It's the cover up that always gets people in more trouble. Or it's the trying to shield yourself from public scrutiny. And look, right or wrong, fair or not, most organizations and individuals, thanks to these little devices that we all carry around in our pocket, are now part of a public conversation. And that's just the reality of the world in which we live in. If companies and individuals have their own Facebook account, expect there to be some public scrutiny on that. That's just reality. And when people aren't willing to be a little bit more candid and forthright and take that initial pain, lean into it, embrace that suck, I guarantee you all you're doing is deferring the pain. And when that has to come due, when you have to pay that pain, it'll be done with interest. It'll be greater and oftentimes far more debilitating for the long term. Just is what it is.
I love it. And so now talk to us. How many years did you put in the military?
I was 9 in before I punched in 2000. And then I've been in the private sector for 22 years and have had my own shop for about 16.
All right. So now, usually in the military, you get to that 9, 10-year mark. It's either get out or do the whole 20.
Right.
But now when a lot of people get out of the military, and I'm one of them, not only did I lose my career because I got hurt on duty, I lost my mission, I lost the camaraderie, and I really didn't know who I was after being Sergeant Kaufman for so long. I didn't. Richard was. And that was the day that I attempted suicide on Memorial Day 2012. So talk to us about your mindset in knowing you're getting out and what your transitioning was like once you got out.
Let me take a pause here. I'm really glad to see you. I'm glad you're here and we're having this conversation. And I'm grateful that you have the courage in yourself to be as forthright with that. That means a lot to me as a fellow veteran. I had a weird transition. So, meaning this, at the time that I got out, which was 2000, the job market was still plentiful for PR people, which is what I was going into. I had my choice of jobs when I had a 2-month leave period. I was on terminal leave and sort of walked through that. What was weird for me And what took me, I think it really was about 4 years to get my land legs, excuse me, is what I call it, was finding an environment, finding a work environment that matched the same environment of camaraderie and friendship and people having each other's back that I had in the Navy in several different ones, and most notably, not only on that guided missile frigate that I talked about, but I was on an aircraft carrier the last 2 years, and as big as that aircraft carrier was, there was a group of us that was really tight that are still talking to each other to this day, and I had some great friends during that 4 year sort of transition when I worked for a couple of PR agencies, but I honestly, and I'm sorry for the people who are probably watching this live, but the owners of those two entities that I worked with were not trustworthy. Sad to say, just wasn't. The people underneath them were, but when you couldn't rely on the person at the top to have your back, it became really, really tough. And then the market started to drop, and I got laid off a couple of times. I'd never been in that position before, where I was going to hunt for work, and it took me a little while to do so. But I'll tell you, I relied more on the lessons that I learned on my first ship, that guided missile frigate, the courage, knowing that I could always get a job, knowing that I was resilient in that, and I stopped worrying about the outcomes to start worrying about the possibilities. And ultimately, that led me to the point where I had the courage of launching my own, consulting practice. And I've had my ups and downs. There have been some really tight years in this thing, and there's been some really lucrative years. And the tight years, I had the same sort of call to action that I had in there. Don't worry about the outcome, just get up and keep swinging. And when those instances occurs, and there were some nail biter times not that long ago, 5-6 years ago, the lessons that I learned on that first ship, when I was called in the carpet with the commanding officer, helped me through that, to the point now that I can't imagine doing anything else that I'm doing. But it's not been throughout hard works. But when I had those same fears, 30 years later, 34 years later, I knew what it was. I could recognize that environment, and I knew how to get through it. And that's what saved me. But I thank you for sharing your story.
So now I have a question, because you said you got out in 2000.
Yeah.
I know that 9/11 changed my whole world. Actually, where I'm sitting, I can actually stand on my porch and see where the Twin Towers once stood, and knew people in the buildings that day. Yeah. So once you just getting out, and then 9/11 happens, did you have that tug of the heartstring about, should I get back in?
I had a little bit of it. I still had buddies of mine who were active duty, one of which was serving in the Pentagon. And I had when the aircraft crashed into the Pentagon, I called my buddy's wife, who was living in the area, and I had her home phone number, and I said, "Is he okay? What's his status?" He goes, "He's okay. He's in another part. Was in another part of the building, and he's all right, but he's not coming home for a little bit. They've it's all hands on deck kind of thing for what he was doing." And I had those moments sitting in this office, in San Diego, working at this PR agency, and like, what the hell am I doing here? I will tell you this, though. I was far enough removed that I thought I'd be better served in doing some things in my community to help strengthen it. And really, at that point, I started getting on this volunteer circuit that I still do today. I'm very involved in initiatives with Rotary. I give blood and blood platelets monthly. I do several other more mentorships at schools and things like that. And I thought at that point, I channeled my, what do I do? Like, where is my giving back? Where's my purpose of serving that I had in the military? I channeled it to other things, because I thought that was probably a better position than me than to sign up again and be that kind of cog in that wheel. I thought I'd be a little more local. And that's been 20 years. And anybody who knows me or sees my social media page, you see all the stuff that I do on a volunteer level, and I love doing it.
Okay, now one thing, a lot of guys, and girls, they struggle when we get out of the military, because we know in the military, or if you're on a shift, you go home when the job is done. It's not like on a regular job in the civilian sector. You get in at 9 o'clock, you go to the water cooler, you make your coffee, you BS a while, you take your lunch, you go home at 4 o'clock. And a
Mhm.
lot of us are like, wait a minute, you guys are going home and the work isn't done yet. We still have more work to do. So a lot of us don't fit in the cog of in corporate. So a lot of us want to go and open our own businesses.
Mhm.
Is
Mhm.
that something? Did you have those same feelings?
I didn't right away. I remember somebody talking to me about, at one point you could own your own business, and I remember thinking, I don't know if I really want that. Well, 6 years later, I started my own business, right, and it's what I've still been doing to this day. And it was a combination of two things, right? It was an observation of what I thought the owners of the companies that I had worked for did well and did not do well. And one of the things that came really clear to me in those first two jobs where I said we didn't trust the business owner, we didn't trust, the CEO, was if I can do this better, or at least I can do this with a greater degree of ethical standards, right? I can do this the right way. And again, not necessarily worried about the outcome, like am I going to generate as much revenue? Am I going to be as successful? But can I operate this better for everyone and all concerned? And so that was one. And then second was that courage that I developed. Like, well, why not me? And here's the thing, right? If you're willing to work hard and lean into the hard times for something, you'll figure it out. I've changed my service model and my the offerings that I have to now what is purely crisis PR, several different iterations over the course of my civilian career, and even in the last 16 years, I've owned a consulting firm. But I've always taken a swing. And I will tell you don't have to have I have an MBA, but you don't have to have a business degree. You just have to be able to work hard and learn the lessons, right? So that as you work hard, you become smarter. You got to learn the lessons of that pain in order to work smarter. And if you can do that, anybody who's watching or listening can do whatever they want. I guarantee it. It's just a matter of how much you're willing to do so. And yeah, I remember people clocking out at 5 o'clock on my first two jobs like it was nothing. Like somebody, there was a starting gun and somebody's like, we're off, and everybody's gone. And I was like, I still got a half hour worth of stuff to do, because that's what we did when we served on board, right? Knockoff was just you can tell me when to come to work. You can't tell me when to leave. I leave when the work is done.
Yep.
Because I also knew that if I didn't do that work, somebody else is going to have to pick up the slack, right? That was always the concern.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Now, before we start talking about owning our own businesses, I want to thank our
Mhm.
sponsors, guys. Without StreamYard, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. We've been with them from the beginning, and I just want to say thanks, StreamYard, guys. If you want to have your own show, definitely think about using StreamYard. They let you actually stream out to sometimes 3, 4 different places at once, including Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and they're really, really affordable. So I'm going to drop a link down below. If you guys are interested, they'll actually take care of you. Also, guys, as you guys know, I started my own coffee company. It's called Vertical Momentum Coffee. Twice the amount of caffeine, no rush. I mean, no crash. Tastes amazing. But the best part is, I'm not for me, but I make $0 off of this. I make no money off of it whatsoever. 100% of it goes to help veterans struggling with PTSD and homelessness. The money goes to Project Die Hard 22. So if you guys love coffee, if you love coffee with a mission, write coffee down below, and I'll get the information to you. Thank you guys so much. But now, Dave, a lot of people, when they start their company, they want to start a t-shirt company, hat company, liquor, coffee.
Right.
But a lot of us, including me, I screwed the pooch. I never, if you've been in the military for less than 3 minutes, you know what a standard operating procedure is, SOP.
Right.
But a
Right.
lot of us don't have a plan. We just go about starting a business willy-nilly
Right.
until 6 months later, you're $10,000 in debt and don't know what
Right.
the hell happened. So talk to us about, did you have a plan before you hung out your shingle, as they say?
I did. I had a business plan. And here's the balance from that, right? I'm all in agreement that you have to develop a plan before you go launch something. The challenge is you can't be tied to that plan. So if you were to ask me 16 years, ago, was my plan solid? Yeah. Now ask me today, is any of that plan still in effect? And the answer is none, zero, not a bit. Keep in mind, 16 years ago, social media wasn't even a thing, right? There wasn't, Facebook was early on. There was MySpace, right? And Friendster, and Twitter was just sort of starting. None of that's none of that's in existence right now. And so you have to adjust to the realities that you deal with and the lessons that you learn to modify the plan. But I'm all in favor of having a starting point that you at least ask yourselves the requisite questions. How are you going to make money? How are you going to ensure that you're profitable so you're not getting into debt? How are you going to attract clients or customers? How are you going to get other people to sing your praises, right? Your marketing. How are you going to actually be able to service the clients and fulfill that? What are your product sets and how are they different from others that are out there? Do some quick research analysis that you could do online and on Google. Who else is out there doing this? And what are their lessons learned? What are the things that they have screwed up on? But like Muhammad Ali says, great plan is only if, or actually, I think somebody's going to call me out. I think it was Mike Tyson. Like a great fight plan is only effective until somebody throws the first punch at you, right? And then you're doing muscle memory. And there's something to that. So it's a challenge of both. And here's the thing: the lessons in those, when those punches are thrown at you, and the pain that you endure, and the courage that you have, and the confidence you have to learn those mistakes, is the secret sauce. That's what makes you successful. There are so many different business plans and so many different entrepreneurs, but it's having the courage and conviction and tenacity and the perseverance with the confidence of learning the lessons along the way that will get you keep swinging that bat, keep trying to get those hits, and ultimately you succeed. It's not going to be without bumps or bruises or scrapes, but let me tell you, it's absolutely possible. I mean that 100%.
And now I love what you're talking about, and I believe what you're saying. And like you said, Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. But a lot of people, they don't realize that you have to start. Every Hall of Famer was a rookie. You have to start somewhere. And like you said, if you never take your bat off your shoulder, you're never going to be able to hit that home run.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't realize. For me, like one of my mentors, his name is John Lee Dumas. He has one of the top podcasts in the world. I had to figure out, what are the best people in my field doing? What are they doing that I'm not? And I think a lot of people, when they start a company, they're not looking at who the best are at what they're doing. They kind of just go with the flow. You know what I mean?
How many restaurants do we know that fail, right? Because somebody has this great idea for what they think is a restaurant, but then have a real hard time executing on that and marketing. And I think that has a lot of it to do with not planning accordingly, but also not having the confidence to see the mistakes along the way and the work ethic to make that happen. But you get those three, there's nothing you can't do. Period.
Well, like when John taught me before I started my show, he says, like Abraham Lincoln said, if he had 6 hours to cut down a tree, he was going to spend 5 hours sharpening the axe. I believe that in order to be successful in business, you have to go an inch wide and a mile deep and figure out who your perfect avatar is. Because like Jim Rohn said, if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. Mm-hmm. So please talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? Know your niche. So I do crisis PR. People go, hey, I've got this referral, this company, they got this great widget. We'd love for you to help promote it and get it in. I don't do promotion, right? I tell people affectionately in my business circles, call me when the shit hits the fan, because that's what I do. I've got great referrals and I'm happy to make an introduction that I do for no kickbacks or anything like that. I just trust these people to do those promotional PRs. I've got some great people do some wickedly cool social media strategies for other organizations. I'll refer those all day long. This is my lane. This is what I love doing. And I believe I do it as good, if not better, than other people because of my background and my experience and my continual thirst for learning on that. But I don't do anything else. It took me a while to figure that out. But now it's actually an extraordinarily good business that I absolutely love doing. I wake up every day like, I can't believe I get to do this type of work and I get to meet cool people along the way to help me do that, or are kind enough to make referrals. Now, I will say this though, you talked about sort of like, the 5 hours of sharpening the axe to cut the tree. I do believe that there is absolutely importance and value in preparation, but there is a point, and I've seen other people do this, where you get to a situation where you have all the data you can amass. It doesn't mean you have a full, complete picture, but you have all the information at your fingertips, and now it's time to move. Now it's time to make a decision, and you got to go with the best information that you have. And there are some people just can't pull the trigger. Some people just can't take that first step, right? And that's as debilitating as anything else. It goes back to that confidence. Hey, look, I think I've got 2/3 of this problem identified, and I think I know the solution on that one there. I'm going to take the first step, and I'm going to lead to the second step. And you know what? You may get 10 steps down the road to a solution and then realize, whoa, these last two were not perfect. I need to go back and I need to retool and do a slight deviation. And that sometimes really bothers people. And I get that. For me, I think it's important to move forward. FDR had a great line. The best decision is the right decision. The second best decision is the wrong decision. And that's because the worst decision is indecision, not taking that step. Have the courage to move forward. You'll learn from the mistakes. That is so vital. So yes, plan, prep, do the business strategy, and then go, and you'll learn the rest.
Okay, now let's talk about crisis management. Like I said, I'm a big sports guy, and I'm a Dolphins fan, and I've always hated the Patriots. But Mr. Kraft has done so many great things over his 30 years ownership as the owner, and he got caught in a scandal a while ago.
Yep.
It did not miss a beat. It just, everybody was like, yeah, oh, well. Okay, but then you get something like just happened with the Dallas Cowboys with the Black Rifle Coffee. Right. Anything Jerry Jones does, they hammer him for.
Yeah.
And so there's two different ends of both owners where Mr. Kraft can pretty much do no wrong, because all the positive stuff he's put in the bank, and then you have the owner of the Cowboys. Everything he does is criticized up to the nth degree. So, and that, I think a lot has to do with them, what they do, as a business owner, but also with how they handle PR.
So I think Kraft is the exception to the rule, because in the last 30 years, not even. Well, just about 30 years, he's owned the Patriots. They've won 6, they got 6 Super Bowl rings and several AFC championships, right? They've defied the odds of success as a football team. And people are very forgiving in the sports world for your transgressions when you win all the time. Cowboys don't have that track record, right? The last Super Bowl Jerry Jones won was 30 years ago plus. Right. And since then, it's been mired in general mediocrity with a person who is looked upon as meddling in football operations. Right. He just doesn't have the title owner. He's got owner, general manager. Okay. So maybe this fault is on yours. So when they have missteps like the ill-timed Black Rifle Coffee sponsorship and partnership right after the Uvalde, Texas shooting, people are going to trounce on that. Now, here's Kraft's problem. Here's Robert Kraft's problem with the Patriots. If the Patriots start to lose, and I mean lose like a couple of seasons of sub 500 record, watch their popularity erode quickly. So you sort of have this house of cards because they're winning and they're successful, right? Give them all the credit in the world for that. But once you start to come back down, if you do, to reality of what sports is a 500 game. Over time, you're going to win about as many as you lose, right? With some exception. If that starts to happen, his reputation starts to erode quickly because you're going to look at all the things that he's sort of just discounted or discarded or put the hand up in the face for the transgressions that will come back to bite him. And they talk about how the faster you rise, the quicker you fall. There's a reason for that, unless you show that empathy, that action, that transparency that we talked about beforehand, right? That leadership prowess. And look, Kraft's done a lot of good things as the organizations and sort of contributions to different charity organizations and youth sponsorships in the New England area. But when he doesn't take responsibility, I think, and as quick as he did for the transgressions that I think you and I are talking about in Florida, that I get concerned that that's going to come back to bite him if they start to lose. So I don't look at Kraft as an example that others should emulate. I look at that as he has defied the odds, and in Vegas, the house always wins. It's the same in your reputation. If you're not consistent in doing the basic fundamental things with what we've talked about beforehand, chances are it's not going to work out for you. Kraft is just an anomaly.
Now, somebody was asking me yesterday, I was being interviewed for in one of the entrepreneur magazines, and they asked me, we're talking about branding. And they asked me, well, what do you think, the number one company that has done really well, and what company do I think is the best at branding? And I said, Coca-Cola. Everybody knows Coke. It's worldwide. They keep on advertising. And even when they screwed up when I was younger and they came out with the new Coke,
it
was horrible, horrible. Eventually they said, listen, we screwed up. We're going back to Coke Classic. And
I remember that.
Time I even think of a polar bear, I think of Coca-Cola. So, that comes to something that, they messed up something, but people were forgiving once they came back and said, all right, I'm sorry, we screwed up. The new Coke sucks. So talk about that, with big companies like that, when even they make a misstep, that if they come back and kind of are saying, yeah, we screwed up, they will be forgiven again.
Look, so there were two even more recent ones that I'll talk about that I thought were great. So KFC, right, the chicken franchise, fried chicken franchise, they had a situation in the UK about 3.5 years ago where they ran out of chicken. So your chicken restaurants in the UK, you run out of chicken. And if you look at the you get the buckets of chickens, it's KFC now with that famous lettering. They put out these broad ads and digital marketing campaigns that had the bucket empty, right? Little scraps of their, batter, fried up batter. And they changed the lettering to say FCK. So KFC to FCK. And they said, we're sorry. We screwed up. We didn't manage our supply chain. We know this is an inconvenience for you, and we're sorry, and we're going to fix it as soon as we can. And they owned it, right? They just were like, our bad. And when they got their supply chain fixed, people kept coming back. They didn't go to alternatives to do so, and still kept very successful franchise. And I think that is a genuinely smart, authentic, transparent way to retain your brand value and preserve as much of your client base as you can while you fix the transgressions, right? Is own it and own it quickly. And some people may say, well, they didn't really have much of a choice. They had no chicken to sell. Yeah, but they could have blamed their suppliers. They could have blamed other companies. They took that responsibility. This is our relationships. These were our business processes. We should have been more prepared for that. We weren't. We're not blaming anybody else. This one's on us. And I think that's telling of an organization that is able to mire through a misstep, a crisis that, by the way, every organization is going to go through at least some point, if not multiple times in their lifetime. It's just the law of averages will tell you that's what's going to happen.
Now, what was the second one?
The second one was Knob Creek Bourbon. Same deal. They had run out of their supplies. And mind you, if you've ever seen, so I love Knob Creek Bourbon. So full disclosure, they age their bourbon, their standard bourbon in the bottles for 9 years. Well, that means you got to sort of forecast the demand almost a decade out. Well, Knob Creek became more popular. They started running out of products, and they were getting pressure to actually pull some of their bourbon out of the casks earlier than the 9-year aging. And because they said, hey, we can't meet demand. Let's instead of 9 years, let's do 8, let's do 7. And they said, no, our quality is where we're known, and our value to that is. So they took up Big Ags with an empty bottle, and we said, we're sorry, we're grateful that you all are popular to do so. And they said we could pull our supplies out earlier than 9 years, but we don't think that's the right service for that. So we're going to parcel out what we've got left. We'll sort of ration that to the stores, and we're going to make this right. And they started producing more with the idea that their bourbon was becoming more popular. And it took about a year for them to get right with that. Guess what? I'm still buying Knob Creek bourbon as a result.
Now, another big thing that happened, I don't remember how many years ago, but Wounded Warrior Project.
Yeah.
Now, which I got a full disclosure, I give to Wounded Warrior Project every month. That comes out of our account every single month. So I'm not bagging on them. But a couple of years ago, their CEOs were flying around, staying in a Ritz-Carlton, and they kind of got banged. And from that point on, a lot of people started looking at nonprofits, looking at a crooked way. They're like, well, if that's the way nonprofits are going to act, I don't want to be involved with them. And I don't think they ever really recovered from that. I don't ever think they ever came out and say, listen, guys, we screwed up. We're sorry. And I don't think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's also incumbent upon not only the executive, but the board. A board of directors for an organization, for-profit, nonprofit, has a responsibility at that point that if there is a decision by the executive team to travel lavishly, particularly nonprofit or things like that, and get called upon that, where donors are saying how much of the dollars that I gave to you goes to that as opposed to goes to veterans in need, I think should be called out on. The board didn't take a leadership role in that one. At least I didn't see anything like that. Somebody may tell me otherwise, and I'm happy to listen to that. But all of the communications I saw, the board was sort of muted until it was very late to do so. And I agree with you. I appreciate when people do give to Wounded Warrior. I don't. I've got several other area nonprofits here in San Diego. 0800 is a good one for those who are in San Diego that I contribute and I support. And there are plenty of other veterans assistance programs. And the reality, though, is when that happens, it not only impacts that one organization, right, one nonprofit, but you said it well, Richard, it impacts nonprofits as a whole. So now other organizations, particularly in the veterans organizations, are going to have to probably proactively come forward and say, here is, as per our 990 tax form, here is our operation structure. Here is our overhead cost. Here's what our executives make. And here's what we do. And be assuring to your donors and your supporters as to what you do in support of the ultimate mission and the necessary but not exorbitant costs to operate that. Look, every nonprofit's going to have overhead, right? You have to have staff and people to actually execute the mission, but it shouldn't be to the extent that somebody's flying private jets around on their on the donor's dime.
So now, talking about what you're doing, how does a person protect their reputation as a business, and how do you build a good reputation as a business?
The first thing you need to do is you need to be the first person to know when somebody's talking about you online. So there are free tools you can use, Google Alerts, TweetDeck, others, to see when somebody's chattering about you. And there's real easy steps to make that happen so that when you notice that, you can respond with, again, that empathy and action. But I do think you bring up an excellent point. You can't let the narrative be set by other entities. So if you're not active on social media as an entity with a consistent, proactive marketing plan, if you're not doing other things online and offline to regularly engage and communicate with audience, starting, by the way, with your employees, which are your primary audience, much like the sailors and Marines on board your ships were your primary audience before you went external. The same thing with organizations. You need to have that proactive marketing plan to do that. Be aware of that. I got a matter on the East Coast right now with a nonprofit that wasn't as proactive in their external communications as they should be. And they've got a small little activist group that's chirping about them, really with false information. But they're able to at least continually squawk on some sort of small level because this organization hasn't been diligent in their Facebook and their social media and their Instagram posts. They don't do email newsletter, and their website needs a lot of work. So I brought in a partner to help build that up. And so that way they can communicate effectively. Because some of the reason they're getting chirped at by this activist organization is because they haven't been communicative enough. And I think that's a lesson for other organizations, certainly to learn.
And I think a lot of people like, and this happened to me about 3 months ago. Somebody had it out for me, and my podcast, because I interviewed somebody and that person didn't like that person. So they thought, okay, I'm going to leave a bad review on social media. But, on my iTunes, I have 530 5-star reviews. So one star review is not going to hurt me, because I've built up that bank account of positiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And do you believe that you need to build up that bank account of positiveness just in case something does happen? People are going to be like, all right, he did something wrong once, but look at the other 538 things he did right.
100%. Put it in context. Look, we all don't hit it out of the park every time, right? And in some cases, we have missteps. And when you own that again with that empathy and action, that's great. But even when somebody's just taking a pot shot at you because they had a bad day, right? Maybe their pet died. I mean, they could nose to be out of joint, and they chirp on something like that. People will put it into context. If there's one person who's mad at you and there's 100 other people who love you, right? That's just, I look at that as being real and authentic, right? Look, you can put a video. We're talking about how this is being streamed on YouTube. You can put a video of a kitten prancing around, playing with a ball string. You're going to get like 1,000 likes, and you'll get like 5 down checks. I don't know what those people who give the down checks problem is, but it is what it is. Don't worry about the 1 or 2 if you're communicating regularly and you've got a following, because they'll also come to your aid. I've seen that before. When somebody is really taking a shot at you and you're responding with empathy and action, and you've got a regular communication, your followers, your fan base will support you. And that is critical. Again, those who don't do that on a regular basis are leaving others to set the narrative. And that just means people like me are going to have to spend more time and more money to fix your reputation.
But now also, like one of my friends, Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, he says, if somebody has a negative review or comment, he'll actually sidebar that person and ask them, what's the problem? And a lot of times, not all, like I was with GNC for over 30 years, and some of my best customers were the ones who were angry and pissed off at another business owner, and I converted them to be our customer and our friends. So talk to us a little bit about how sometimes, even if there's something negative, you can spin it to a positive.
Yeah, I agree that there are times where I think that that's appropriate, and actually it's important to do so. But you want to be careful with that. I'll go back to the organization in the East Coast that I mentioned as this activist group. This activist group has a vested interest in creating controversy. That's how they get a donor base. That's how they get supporters. And they're not that influential in many respects, right? They've got a small circle that wants to hear from them, and they're really communicating to that. So those people continue to donate money to allow, the entity to continue. And I told my advice to the organization was, it's a pitch in the dirt. Don't swing at it. Let's go proactively. Let's also set up some response plans in case news organization called, or your donors are calling to ask about it, or other individuals of, vested interests and key stakeholders are inquiring about what's all this about. Then you're going to want to respond to them. But you don't necessarily want to engage with a fight of somebody who's just teasing you, right? But I can see where there's certain areas, particularly in online reviews, where there's a customer that's squawking, right? You need to respond to those with empathy and action. And you need to be engaging on that. But I would say it takes a trained ear to figure out which of those you want to engage and which you don't, because it's just a bait that somebody's trying to get you to take. And when you do that, you give that entity even greater visibility, and you have the opposite effect. You actually create a there.
And now, for a new business owner, if I've actually done a few press releases for the show and other things, and a lot of people, they don't believe in PR. They believe if you build it, they will come. And in today's day and age, if you build it, they're not going to come unless they have a reason to come. So talk to us a little bit about, doing a press release for your business. Also, if you're not on the first page of Google, you're not on Google because
Right.
they're not going to see you.
Yeah. So let me unpack that because there's a couple of entities there. I don't believe if you build it, they will come. I've seen a great many organizations and a great many entities on the product side and service side that were really stellar that no one knew about because they just sort of sat there and waited for the phone or the phone to ring or people walk in the door. And if they don't know you're there, they won't come and visit you. That's just the reality of that. Now, how do you get people noticing from that? Yeah, there's still the idea of putting out a press release and getting somebody else to talk about it. But I will tell you that most of the time, the fact that you have this entity that you're starting, getting something in the news is not your first priority, especially when you're just launching. You got to build up a follower base yourself before you're going to get the ear of the news organizations. And also, by the way, depending on the type of product you have or service that you offer and the audience you have, even if you get it in like the local news or the paper, your audience probably doesn't see that because most people aren't, especially the younger demographics, they're not getting the newspaper. They're not reading, the local bulletins from a reporter. They're certainly not watching local television news. They're following an influencer on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or LinkedIn. And you need to be present with your own social media prowess and connecting with people. In other words, be your own broadcaster. I talk about how these little devices that we all carry around make my job and my services much more in demand because any organization of any size can be taken down by an Instagram post. But the opposite is any organization can be their own broadcaster. If you have that active communication on social media, you can attract people yourself. You don't have to wait for a third-party intermediary to care about it. If you do it the right way with good quality content and connecting with the right people, you can get to be known. But not doing any of that because, well, I don't like social media. Fine. That's where the audience is oftentimes. And if you want to be known, you've got to be proactive in that.
I love it. So now, how do we find you? How do we support your mission? How, if we get jammed up, how do we get you to bail our asses out?
Look, I appreciate that, right? So I'm if you go Dave Oates Crisis PR, my LinkedIn profile comes up, my Twitter comes up, and those things. Please connect with me on social media. But if you also go to public relations, that's plural, publicrelationssecurity.com, publicrelationssecurity.com. That's my website. That's my company. You can contact me and set up a free 15-minute conversation about a matter. If you're having a bad dream, if you're a small business owner, you're just not sure how to respond to this one, I'll give you 15 minutes, no expectations of anything else. My mission is to be a conduit by which people can sleep better at night. And look, the business will come in as it should, but if I can be through these type of entities and others, be a resource that other people can do stuff on their own and continue to work hard and be confident that they'll learn from the mistakes and be successful over time, man, I'm paying it forward because there was a whole bunch of people who did that for me, both when I was active duty like you, Richard, and now. And I'm just trying to pay it forward as best I can.
All right. So last question I have, that was normally the last one, but this one I think needs
Okay.
to be heard. If there's somebody out there that's watching this and they want to start a business, and you said before we even started what your TED talk would be don't be afraid to pick up the bat and swing. So if there's somebody out there struggling with deciding if they should or they shouldn't, what advice would you give them?
Don't be the first person to say you can't. Don't talk yourself out of it. The mind is an amazing machine because it can give you a false sense of insecurity. The only person, oftentimes, when you come up with this idea in your head, like, wow, this would be great, the first person that talks you out of it is yourself. Don't allow that, right? Figure out how to make it work and have the confidence that you'll learn the lessons along the way. And it doesn't mean, as we talked about, that you just dive into the deep end of the pool without a plan, but have the confidence to say, why not me? Because I'm telling you, If you don't do it, you're going to ask yourself, what if all day long, and get that bat off your shoulder, which is something I wish I told my 8-year-old self, and start swinging, because the hits will come if you keep doing so.
I love it. Guys, make sure, and I'm telling you, make sure you go to Dave's LinkedIn profile. That minute of talking about the Dallas Cowboys and Black Rifle was truly amazing. He put it out about 20 hours ago somewhere. It's amazing if you want to know what to do and not what not to do. So, Dave, I just want to say, brother, thank you. I'm very humbled and grateful for your friendship, first of all. And I just want to say thank you for everything you are doing.
And likewise, my friend, thanks for your service. Thanks for putting this together. It's an honor to know you.
All right, guys. So just remember, like Oprah Winfrey says, and Booker T. Washington said, if you want to help yourself, help somebody else. All right, guys. Remember, vertical momentum. The only way to go is up. Have an amazing weekend, guys. All right. Bye-bye.